Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 691, and today's date is June 11th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Government Mobilizing Forces in Ukraine for the Next Major Offensive. Now, before I get started, I just want to let everyone know that the video interview with Simon Black from Sovereign Man has been uploaded to the X22 Report Spotlight channel, so you can go right to that channel. You can listen to the interview, or you can come to the X22report.com site. It is on the right-hand side. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, as we know, Greece is still struggling at this time. There has been no deal whatsoever. The Greek government is requesting a 9-month extension of the current loan agreement to ensure the funding of Greece's economy. This was coming out of Brussels, and then what happened after that is that the IMF said, you know something, we're on different ends of this deal. We have no common ground whatsoever, and it seems at this time the IMF's Rice says no progress made toward a deal with Greece. Major differences with Greece in key areas. IMF's technical team on Greece has left Brussels. The IMF has halted bailout talks with Greece after a failure to make progress in negotiations. And it seems like at this time, the entire thing has completely fallen apart. And again, we know there's another payment due by the end of June. They put off the June 5th payment, bundled it all together. And Greece, at this point in time, is running out of time. They need to make a decision in which direction they're going to go, or they're going to default. And the people are nervous, they're scared, they're taking out their money. Withdrawals are increasing every single day. Lines at the ATM are increasing every day. And we see S&P has come out and they said, you know something? That we don't see Greece doing any better, and we believe the country will likely default in the next 12 months. Now, again, S&P was one of those companies that is run by the central bankers that told us that the subprime securities were all AAA, so it's very hard to believe what they say. And as soon as they try to downgrade, I should say, the United States, what happened? The United States sued them, and they said, oh, no, everything is okay, and they had to pay out a fine. And we could see that at this time, they're looking at Greece. They're heading towards a default. They're heading towards maybe going with the BRICS or the Russian system. And it seems that this is more than likely going to happen. And this will mean a default. And again, we have to remember the bankers have already protected themselves. They created a little group that said, this might not really be a default. It might just be, a non-payment. So we really don't have to pay out on the derivatives, the credit default swaps. So everything is okay. But this will affect the Eurozone. Actually, it will rip it apart, because other countries are going to look at this and say, you know something? Maybe we need to follow. Now, will this happen the second it happens? No. A couple months down the line, if Greece decides to go with BRICS or Russia, and they see economic growth and they're getting out of debt, they're going to say, hey, we need to do what they just did. And this will then tear up the Eurozone. Here in the United States, what are we seeing? Well, they're trying to keep the illusion alive. They're trying to convince us that everything is absolutely fine. There are no problems here whatsoever with the economy. I mean, it's funny. I have a friend who is in real estate right now. I try to talk to this person about real estate, but they're one-sided. They don't see the big picture. They don't see what's really going on. And this person was telling me that the real estate market is the best it's ever been. This person thinks the real estate market is going to go twice as high as it is right now. And when I'm looking at it, I see more and more homes. I just look at a couple of houses in the northeastern section of the United States, and I see that a couple of the homes, of course, this is the hot time for real estate, so they put it up for sale. And a month and a half later, they lowered the price already by $10,000. So I'm starting to see these homes starting to come down in price. People are wondering why they can't sell it at this high price. And usually within 3 weeks, if you don't get any type of offer or anything like that, it's time to lower. And we're starting to see this across the country. I mean, every single area is different, yes. And I know a lot of people write in and tell me that, oh, in my area, it's fantastic. But we saw this back in 2007, 2008, where all of a sudden the traffic dried up in New York. Prices started to come down, but in the South, in Florida, everything was fine. And then 6 to 7 months later, all of a sudden we had a huge problem in Florida. So we can see that it doesn't hit every single place at the same exact time. But it will spread, because we know that this market is a bubble. It was created by the central bank. It was not created by the people. So there's no support behind it. We see that initial jobless claims here in the United States rose to 297,000, slightly worse than expected. This leaves initial jobless claims practically unchanged for the last 6 months. Continuing claims rose by their most in 6 months. So again, the United States government does not count those people who are being laid off. Those people who were being laid off in Texas because of the oil energy crisis, those people who are being laid off by these major corporations, they seem never to count any of these people. And when we look at the initial jobless claims, they take out what they don't want. They manipulate the numbers to make it seem like everything is absolutely fine. But we know it's not. We know it's not fine. These numbers don't make sense for what is going on in the world, in the United States, especially with retail sales, especially with real estate, because we see store closings. We see huge investment companies buying up homes, not one or two, thousands of them, to keep the market propped up. We see the Consumer Comfort Index drop to its lowest since November, having fallen 9 straight weeks. The situation is even more worrisome as the U.S. consumer propensity to buy has crashed by the most since Lehman. Because again, the American everyday person is completely tapped out. They're getting laid off. They're getting part-time jobs. A lot of people are having a difficult time to find these jobs. We know the graduates out of college, they are having a very tough time finding work. Yes, they're getting part-time work, but they're not getting those full-time jobs that they were promised when they went to college. Now they have these huge amount of student loans. It's very difficult to pay them, and it's difficult to make ends meet, and this is why they're still living with their parents, just so they can make those payments. And this has a huge effect on the next generation because they're not saving money. They don't have the money to put down on a house. They're not going out purchasing a new car. They're not going out and purchasing in retail. All they're doing is living with their parents and paying their student loans until they find that full-time job. We see business inventory to sales ratio remain in the flashing red recessionary environment as inventories surge more than expected in April. Motor vehicles saw a 1.2% rise month on month in inventories, leading the surge in if we build it, hopefully these people will buy it on credit. And what we're seeing once again is channel stuffing. The retail sales out in the corporate media today is telling us that retail is bouncing back. Of course, during the spring, summer months, which is really not a strong time for retail. But they're telling us it's bouncing back, and of course it's because of autos. And what we're seeing right now is the auto manufacturers are up to their old tricks. They are channel stuffing the dealerships to make it look like they're manufacturing and they're selling. Welcome to the new normal. This is what we see every single time. And they're hoping that people will come in because they're going to give loans to the subprime people. Actually, anyone that has a heartbeat, they'll give a loan to just to pick up that car. There has never been more cars in inventory than now. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't. The only reason they're doing all this is to convince everyone that everything is fine. They'll use any trick in the book. And again, this entire economy is not people driven. It's U.S. government / central bank driven. Because the U.S. government manipulates the numbers. The central bank gives the free money to go out and purchase homes. The U.S. government lowers the credit standards for people to purchase homes and cars. They allow people to get student loans for any type of education. Doesn't matter if there's a job out there, as long as they keep these bubbles inflated. And this is what we're seeing right now. The stock market, banks, they take the free money that they get at the short-term window, 0% interest rate, they put it right back into the stock market to pump it up. This is what they're doing. It's completely manipulated at this time. And we know that once this manipulation cannot handle what's going on anymore, it will pop. We saw it in 2008. We are going to see it once again. Now, when will that be? We don't know, but we can see over this long period of time, we are definitely leading up to that point. Now, as we know, Iceland, when everything was falling apart in 2008, decided to arrest and jail their bankers that caused the problem in their country. Then the people took back control of their country. And we're starting to see that Iceland is really bouncing back right now. And I think this is what the central bankers are very worried about. That if Greece leaves the Eurozone and they do what Iceland did and they have economic growth, this is going to pose a problem for the private Western central bank system. Because how do they explain this? They've been putting them into debt since 2008, and then all of a sudden, as soon as they left the central bank, they have economic growth. And we really don't hear about Iceland that often, especially not in the news. They keep that very, very quiet because they don't want other countries to realize that, yeah, Iceland is doing okay. Even when they didn't listen to the private Western central banks, they didn't join the Eurozone. And we're seeing that the IMF, their data is showing that Iceland's economy recovered after it imprisoned bankers and let banks go bust instead of bailing them out. Whoa. You mean if we didn't do a bailout, we wouldn't be in this situation? Yes, we might have been in a terrible situation back then. But guess what? It would have been improved. And if we got rid of the central bank, I think it would have improved even more. But again, the central bank was not going to let this happen. And we can see they were scaring everyone, thinking that, we were going to see riots and things like that. But Iceland has achieved economic recovery without compromising its welfare model of universal health care and education. This year, the IMF declared that Iceland had achieved economic recovery without compromising anything. They put people in jail. They didn't bail out the banks. And now they're taking control of money creation. And we can see the unemployment rate has truly come down in Iceland. And if you look at this compared to the United States, of course, as we know, the unemployment here is manipulated. And if you look at the unemployment rate in Europe, they are surpassing all of these countries. And they're doing very, very well. Now, in the United States and throughout Europe, we know the situation is very, very different. We know we had bailouts. We know this is a bubble economy. We know this is not an economy that is driven by the people. It's driven by the central bank. We know that they're very worried from when all of this comes to a screeching halt and it collapses, they're going to have a lot of angry people on their hands. A lot of people that they know are going to riot. A lot of people that are going to come after them. And this is why we see the White House putting up spikes on the fences, adding buffer zones, adding more guards in front of their government buildings, because they're prepping. The same thing in Europe. They have the European police. They have Spain practicing for civil disobedience. They have other countries with these terrorist attacks putting boots on the ground, changing the laws, removing the rights of the people. You name it, they're doing whatever they possibly can to control the situation. And that's the name of the game, control. Because that's what the central bank, U.S. government loves. They love control. They don't want to give it up. They'll hold on to it to the very end, no matter how many people they have to kill. It makes no difference to them. And we can see they're pushing more control on the people. The Department of Homeland Security may now be collecting video of you as part of a project to sniff out behavioral indicators of malicious intent. In other words, DHS wants to use video images of passengers to predict crimes. And we know this is not going to work. DHS quietly released an online privacy impact assessment that provides the legal justification for an ongoing experiment it is calling Data Collection for the Centralized Hostile Intent Project. They're planning to collect video images at designated areas throughout the airports, including at TSA security checkpoints, ticket counters, baggage claim, and the airport entrance. And they're saying, don't worry, we're not going to capture the audio, which you know, this is exactly what they're going to do. When has a government official or government employee ever come out and say, yeah, this is what we're not going to do, and we find out that this is exactly what they did? It always seems to tell you a lie. It's always the opposite of what they're telling you. And DHS right now contends it has the legal right to record passengers, citing existing U.S. law dictating the mission of the TSA is to protect U.S. transportation systems, to ensure freedom of movement for people and commerce. The software they're using is Riot Rapid Information Overlay Technology, and they will be filming everyone in the airports. Again, to make people feel very uncomfortable, to keep people under control. And as we know, and it's been reported that the TSA has never, ever stopped a terrorist. The Patriot Act has proven that the NSA has never found any terrorist act whatsoever. And when there was some type of terrorism, like the Boston bombing, no indication, no reports, no alerts, nothing. If you notice, whenever there's a problem like this, they report nothing. They had no information about it. Because why? It was an inside job. It was government agencies doing it to push an agenda. That's it. This is what we see every single time. So all of this is to do one thing and one thing only. To get people to give up their rights. To get people to do things they really don't want to do. That their inner gut feeling tells them this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. But I'm so scared that I should just listen to them and do what they say. And this is how they play people. The TTIP and the TTP, it's having the TPP, they're having a problem pushing this in Europe, especially the TTIP. Because the people are starting to realize that this is not for us. I mean, they have petitions. Over 2 million plus people have signed it. They're protesting outside of European Parliament. It's descending into chaos. And right now, the EU is running scared. They don't know what to do because of what is going on here. And they're putting off the voting for this at this time because what is going on? Now, of course, the U.S. government central bankers don't like this. They want all this fast track. They want it done because we know all of this is to benefit them, not the people. And this is why they're running into these roadblocks. And you would think as the governments that's serving the people, they would hear this and they would say, oh, wait, this is not for the people, but none of them hear it. They don't want to hear it. They're in it for themselves. They're being paid by their masters. So all they're doing is pushing, not listening to the people. And this is how you know that this has nothing to do with benefiting the people whatsoever. It's to benefit the bankers and the corporations. Now we see in Afghanistan, and we know the United States government, central bankers, and NATO, they're never leaving this area. Yes, they can tell you they're removing the troops, but of course now we're seeing the Islamic State. We see that they're getting reports now that they're in Afghanistan. And the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State of Central Asia, Daniel Rosenblum, said, yeah, the United States is not prepared to assess the future outcome of Afghanistan with the Islamic State and the expansion into Afghanistan. We're just going to keep our troops right there right now. We're going to bring a couple more in there, but we're really not ready to look at this until the situation gets a lot worse. And what that really means is when we want more troops in this area, we will gin up events there. We'll let people know it's the Islamic State because, again, the Islamic State is the proxy army of the United States government, Israel, UK, and other countries. And we can see they use them in all these countries to push their agendas. And eventually there will be a lot more troops going back to Afghanistan. We are not leaving that area because it is rich in lithium, copper, oil. It's in a strategic location. China and Russia cozying up to the Afghanistan government. And they're not leaving. They will never let this go. Now, out in Ukraine, we understand Ukraine is in a lot of debt. Their entire economy is completely collapsing. Their currency is collapsing. The people are having a very tough time. And Ukraine has declined a debt restructuring offer suggested in May by a group of investors representing about $9 billion of Ukrainian bonds, including the biggest lender, Franklin Templeton. And right now, the IMF is reassessing Ukraine's progress on reforms. And the lender has repeatedly said that the bailout deal greatly depends on the progress of debt restructuring. But the IMF is ready to pay its next tranche of the bailout to Kiev, even if there is no final deal of the debt discussion. Because they realize if they don't give them more debt, they have no funds to pay anything. The entire system collapses. How will they pay for the armed forces who are mounting a major offensive? So what they're going to do is they're going to penalize the people, as central banks always do. And Ukraine has agreed to increase the cost of gas to consumers by 280% and 66% for heating in an effort to get extra financial aid from the IMF. So who pays for all this? As we know, the people. So the people are suffering. The United States went into all these countries, Iraq, Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Ukraine, Sudan, Somalia, and all the economies, and there's many more, and all these economies are completely falling apart. The people are suffering. There's war, humanitarian aid, and they're in a huge amount of debt. So how is this better for the people? It isn't. Even though they try to convince you that it is not better for the people. And this is what's happening here in the U.S. More and more debt, more taxes interwoven into these laws like FATCA, Obamacare, and the U.S. government continually adds more and more debt, more debt, more debt. Who pays for all this? Well, the people. Well, of course, the people could say this is odious debt. We didn't want these wars. We didn't want to give aid to all of these countries. And we can say, you know what, we're not paying for this. But again, they're going to try to make every person accountable for this. They're going to try to make everyone go to war. And this is where we are headed right now. We see there are more reports saying that Ukraine is now moving about 40 pieces of heavy military equipment to the separation line. 13 Grad multiple launch rocket systems have been spotted, and many other military assets. They are preparing to go forward with this offensive. We see right now Ukraine's border service confirms foreign military equipment is crossing the border. But it's not for Russia. It's for the Ukrainian troops. We're seeing, because of the Ukrainian-American exercises in Ukraine, that equipment of the units involved are coming over from Hungary and being delivered to these units. So when the United States government central bankers are out there and NATO is out there saying they're seeing military units come in, it's their own to get the forces ready. They're seeing about 10 pieces of equipment have crossed the border. And they're saying, well, yeah, we are bringing this in, but after these drills and exercises, we're going to return them. And we know what happens. They're being brought in for a specific reason, and they're never returned. They are permanent because they're going to be used in the offensive. We see the Ukrainian authorities have introduced a ban on crossing the contact line in the country's eastern breakaway region of Lugansk due to increased fighting. So they're shutting it all down, cutting Donbass off. Russia is out there, and they are now accusing Kiev of the bloodshed in Donbass. They're saying the United States is not only avoiding any real efforts in settling the Ukrainian crisis and stopping the humanitarian catastrophe in the Donbass area, but it seems they are pushing the current Kiev authorities into continuing the conflict. Yes, this is what is happening, and Russia is calling them on it now. Because they see the Minsk II agreement, it's completely gone. No one is abiding by it right now. They don't care about it. We see the U.S. trainers, well, they're graduating their first group of Ukrainian soldiers. And they are ready to go. They're ready to fight. And they're ready to be put into use. And they're saying they're going to have another tranche of these soldiers in the next couple of weeks. So if we look at the timeline now, June, July, they should be ready to go by August. Now, is this set in stone? No. But we've seen it happen many, many times as we approach August when Congress goes on break. Obama has free reign of the government, the Capitol building, and everything that goes on. And we just seem to have things occur like August of 2013 when we brought in all our military because of the sarin gas false flag. August of 2014, all of a sudden the Islamic State maneuvers into Iraq, and Obama decided to send advisors into Iraq and start bombing Syria. So it seems like we are headed on that course right now. It seems like they have specifically prepared all of this for this time period. And we see Poroshenko right now said during his visit to Mariupol on Thursday that fortifications to be built on the disengagement line in Donbass should be ready by mid-July. All fortifications should be erected and completed by mid-July. They have spent $47.2 million on this. So we see all these indicators now lining up perfectly for something to happen. And we're going to have to watch this as we approach. And we can see already that the United States is out there and they're saying that Russia has violated the Treaty of Open Sky. Now we know the Open Skies Treaty allows other countries to fly over the region to inspect certain areas. And we can see at this point in time the U.S. would like to get rid of this because they're building up their forces. They don't want the Open Sky Treaty. They don't want Russia flying over the borders of Ukraine or anywhere else so they can see what's going on. And it seems like they're pushing the agenda to get rid of this completely. We see right now that if the United States places medium and short-range missiles in Europe facing Russia, this will basically null and void the 1987 INF Treaty. And the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces, the INF Treaty, required the United States and the Soviet Union to eliminate and permanently get rid of their nuclear and conventional ground-launched ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. They both destroyed about 2,692 short and medium and intermediate range missiles. And as of right now, They don't have these missiles, but it seems like they'll be bringing them back in, and it will null and void this treaty. And we're going to have to watch that situation very, very carefully, because if they do place these in this area, again, we see another indicator that they are preparing for a war, and they don't care about the treaties at this time. We see the Russian Navy is going to get a new generation super heavy landing ship by 2020. This one ship will be able to support over-the-beach landings of up to about 300 Marines, 40 armored personnel carriers, and 13 tanks, plus carry about many different types of helicopters on board. And you can see China, Russia, they're continually advancing, building, because they know eventually these central bankers are going to make their move. We see right now there's information where the U.S. is obstructing international efforts to eradicate biological weapons, seeking to involve other nations covertly in research on weaponized disease like Ebola. And we see that they've been experimenting in Africa. They've been working with other countries with chemical weapons. And now we see it with biological weapons. And we're seeing that Russia is calling out the U.S. because they're saying that the U.S. is trying to encircle Russia with bioweapons labs and covertly spread them around Russia. And we saw the first mistake of this with anthrax that was being delivered to different countries, different states, and it got out there. And right now, Russia is calling out the United States, saying, why are you dealing with this? Why are you sending this to other countries? And it added that the anthrax outbreak incident occurred in 2001. It involved the U.S. military lab. And that, again, was a false flag. We see Russia is saying that they will work with the Muslim countries to fight against terrorism. If you notice, the United States government and their coalition forces, they don't want to work with Assad to get rid of the Islamic State. They don't want to work with Russia to get rid of the Islamic State, because the Islamic State is their proxy army. They don't want these countries in there defeating them. They need them to go after Assad and to reestablish the puppet regimes in all of these Middle Eastern countries. And now Russia is making deals with these countries saying, listen, we'll help you. We'll help you fight back this Islamic State. Do you need our help? And this is going to be a huge problem. We see in Libya, the Islamic State is making moves in there. And of course, as we know, this is the proxy army to make sure they can get into this country, to make it seem like the country is completely falling apart. They're saying the Islamic State shot down 2 warplanes. They seized an air base in there. And they're trying to convince everyone that, yes, we will definitely need to go into Libya next, and this is what they're doing. And as we know, they're bringing in more troops into Iraq. They're going to build another base, and they're actually talking about building hubs around Iraq to fight the Islamic State, their own proxy army. But as we know, this is not what they're fighting. They're preparing, getting ready covertly to get Assad. And a lot of these U.S. trainers are going to go into the most dangerous areas, most likely Syria, to prepare the Free Syrian Army that is being trained in Jordan. And we know they've just released a tranche of these soldiers, and more are coming. And we can see that with Ukraine, with what's going on in Jordan and Turkey, and all this training of all these forces, it's being built up for a major, major offensive. And if you really think about this, they keep telling us that the Islamic State is this dangerous terrorist group, that they've captured all these cities. They've stolen the U.S. military equipment, which we know it wasn't stolen, it was given to them. There's a lot of airdrops. It's already been proven, there's a fact that the United States supplies them with everything they need. But the U.S. government can't come up with any type of strategy to get rid of them. Don't you find that odd? They can't think of a way to get rid of this small group that has long lines of Toyota trucks. They're riding around in Humvees. And they have the coalition forces, the best weapons out there. Well, maybe some not that great, but a lot of weapons, a lot of force, and they can't come up with any type of strategy to get rid of the Islamic State. The reason for that is because they don't want to. They need them for an event here in the United States and throughout Europe, and to get rid of Assad. This is why they continually say there is no strategy. But behind the scenes, the strategy is we're using them to remove Assad. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.